The gas pump is the least profitable thing in the entire building, and convenience stores want you to believe it's the whole business. On every gallon sold, the store nets somewhere around a dime to 15 cents after taxes and card fees, according to NACS, the industry's own trade group. That's not a business. That's a rounding error, wearing a business's clothes. So if the pump barely pays for itself, why does every single convenience store in America build itself around one? Because the pump was never the product. The pump is the hook. NACS puts total industry sales, fuel, and in-store combined, at $817.5 billion in 2025. Fuel alone accounted for $476.3 billion of that. Everything else, the $341.2 billion in food and merchandise sold inside the building, is where the real profit hides. Walk through the math on a single fill-up. A driver pulls in, spends 4 minutes at the pump, watching $40 or $50 disappear into a tank. NACS data puts fuel at roughly 2/3 of a convenience store's total revenue in 2025, yet less than 40% of its gross profit dollars. The store nets maybe $2 or $3 on that fill-up after wages and card fees. Now that same driver walks inside for a fountain drink and a bag of chips. NACS's own speed studies show the average customer is in and out of the store in about 3.5 minutes, which is exactly the point. Nobody has time to comparison shop, so nobody does. The soda costs the store pennies and can carry a margin past 70%. One coffee and a sandwich can out-earn the entire fill-up that brought the customer through the lot in the first place. The fuel is the lure. The counter is the catch. This isn't an accident. It's a 100-year-old blueprint. In 1927, an iStock employee in Dallas named Jefferson Green started stocking bread, milk, and eggs alongside his ice blocks, since customers kept asking for them after the grocery stores had closed for the night. The idea wasn't cheapness, it was hours. That small iStock became 7-Eleven, named for the hours. The founders eventually settled on 7 in the morning to 11 at night, a schedule that sounded radical then and reads almost quaint now that thousands of these stores never close at all. The category was built on a single insight. People don't just want cheap, they want available. And available is a thing you can charge a premium for. That premium shows up clearest in coffee and fountain drinks. A large soda costs a store around a dime in syrup and cup. It sells for $2 to $4 depending on the market. Coffee runs the same script. Pennies and beans and cups, $2 a cup, refilled all morning by regulars who've folded the stop into their commute. Food service as a whole now makes up more than a quarter of everything a convenience store sells inside its walls, and NACS puts its share of in-store gross profit at close to 39%. It's not the biggest category by volume. It's the biggest category by margin, and margin is the only number that pays the light bill. Cigarettes work the opposite way. Margins have been squeezed for years by rising excise taxes, health warnings, and a customer base that keeps shrinking. Every year, the Surgeon General's numbers come out, and the category now barely earns its shelf space. Stores keep the rack anyway, since a pack of cigarettes guarantees a visit, often several a week, from a customer who buys something else on the way out. The product barely pays for itself. The visit it buys is worth more than the product ever was, which is the entire logic of the store distilled into a single item behind the counter. Lottery tickets run the same trick from another angle. State's hand, the store only a small slice of every ticket sold. On paper, it's barely worth stocking. In practice, it's one of the most reliable foot traffic generators in the building. Because a lottery customer has to walk to the register, stand in line, and look at everything stacked along the way before paying franchise fees, add a layer most customers never think about. 7-Eleven, the largest chain in the category, doesn't charge franchisees a flat royalty on sales. It takes a cut of gross profit instead, typically somewhere between 45% and 56%, according to the company's own franchise disclosure filings. In exchange, 7-Eleven often owns the real estate and equipment outright, handing the franchisee a turnkey store instead of a construction project. The corporation barely has to touch the day-to-day mess of the store to collect its share. It sells the map, the recipe, and the brand, and lets somebody else absorb the risk of standing behind the counter for 16 hours a day. Real estate turns the rest of the operation into something closer to a toll booth than a shop. Store location isn't picked the way a boutique picks a neighborhood. It's picked the way a toll booth picks a highway. There are more than 152,000 convenience stores in the United States, roughly one for every 2,250 people, and NACS surveys find that almost 2 out of 3 Americans live within a 5-minute drive of one. Chains model traffic counts down to the intersection and the turn radius into the lot. A store on the wrong side of a busy road, one that forces an inconvenient left turn to enter, can badly underperform an identical store across the street, purely because of which way the doors face at rush hour. The building is nearly incidental. The corner is the asset. Casey's General Stores shows what happens when a chain builds its entire identity around the inside of the building instead of the pump outside it. It's the 3rd largest convenience store chain in the country by store count, and food industry analysts now rank it among the 5 largest pizza sellers in the United States, ahead of national chains with drive-thrus and delivery fleets. Prepared food at Casey's has historically carried gross margins between 40 and 60%, dwarfing what the same store earns on a gallon of gas. The company has leaned so hard into the strategy that it pulled in nearly $3.92 billion in revenue in a single recent quarter, and it now plans to add hundreds of new stores over the next 3 years, built around kitchens rather than pumps. Fuel gets the car off the highway. Pizza is why Casey's outgrows chains that never bothered to build a kitchen. Not every chain that tried to play this game survived it. In 2021, Marathon Petroleum sold its entire Speedway chain, nearly 3,900 stores across 35 states, to 7-Eleven for $21 billion in cash, the largest deal in convenience store history. The deal pushed 7-Eleven's North American footprint to roughly 14,000 stores overnight, making it the single largest operator in the category by a wide margin. Marathon had spent decades running a refinery empire and never fully cracked the discipline of staffing a coffee counter and a hot dog roller at 2 in the morning. The lesson was blunt: pumping fuel and running a convenience counter like one business from the outside, but they're staffed, priced, and run like 2 separate ones that happen to share a parking lot. Running that second business lean is exactly what makes it fragile. The industry supports close to 2.75 million jobs nationwide, yet averages fewer than 20 employees per store, which keeps labor costs down, but leaves almost nobody available to watch the aisles at any given hour. Shrink, the industry term for merchandise lost to theft, damage, and error, eats meaningfully into profit at that staffing level, and a store running on 2 employees simply cannot watch every aisle at once. Card processing fees pile on top of it. Swipe fees across the industry hit a record $21.3 billion in 2025, a cost that barely existed at this scale a generation ago, sitting quietly on every transaction, whether it's a fill-up or a candy bar. Direct operating costs across the industry, wages, card fees, utilities, and shrink combined, still rose 4.2% that year as fuel prices fell, which shows how much of the squeeze has nothing to do with what's on the shelf at all. Electric vehicles threaten the foundation of the entire model, not just its margins. They charge overnight at home, away from any forecourt, which means the reason drivers pull off the highway could simply stop existing. 7-Eleven has already launched its own charging network, 7Charge, betting that a car that needs 20 minutes to charge is a better customer than one that needs 4 minutes to fill up, since 20 minutes is enough time to sit down and eat. General Motors and EVgo are building a similar network around Pilot and Flying J locations, and Taco Bell has started experimenting with fast chargers of its own, which tells you how seriously the rest of retail is taking the same threat. The chains that see the shift coming are racing to prove they were never really gas stations to begin with. If they're right, the pump disappears and the counter survives. If they're wrong, An entire category built on a 100-year-old bet about foot traffic runs out of a reason for anyone to walk through the door. So that is how convenience stores actually make money. And the fuel was never really the business. It was the invitation. They lose money or barely break even at the pump on purpose, because the pump is the cheapest advertisement they will ever buy. A giant lit sign on every highway that says stop here. Once you've stopped, the only thing standing between you and the door is your own willingness to walk 20 feet toward a fountain drink you didn't plan on buying. The margin was never at the pump. It was always past it. If you liked learning how convenience stores actually make their money, make sure to like and subscribe. And if you're curious how other everyday businesses quietly make their profit, check out our video on how dollar stores make money, or the full playlist on the channel. We'll see you in the next one.